I'll never forget the sound of that punch. It wasn't just a fist hitting my brother's face. It was the system telling us we didn't matter. In that courtroom, I saw his eyes, wide with shock, then rage. I was shaking, helpless, my heart screaming, but the next day, he didn't just sit there and take it. He fought back, not with fists, but with something sharper, the law itself. Want to know how? I'm not the kind of person who cries easily. Growing up in our neighborhood, you learn to keep your feelings locked tight, like a diary you don't even let yourself read. But that day in the courtroom, I felt my chest crack open. My little brother, Jay, just 17, was sitting there in that orange jumpsuit, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He's got this smile, you know, the kind that makes you believe things might turn out okay. But not that day. That day, his smile was gone, and I was gripping the bench so hard my knuckles hurt. Jay wasn't perfect. He'd gotten into trouble. Petty stuff, like sneaking into abandoned buildings to tag them with his art. He's an artist, not a criminal, but try telling that to the cops who profiled him from the start. They saw a black kid with a hoodie and assumed the worst. That's why he was there in court, for some minor charge that should have been a slap on the wrist. I was there to support him, to be the big sister who promised Mom I'd always have his back. But I wasn't ready for what happened. The cop, a guy with a face like he'd rather be anywhere else, was testifying. Jay whispered something to his lawyer, probably about how the cop lied about what went down. I couldn't hear it, but I saw the cop's eyes snap to Jay, like he'd been waiting for an excuse. Before I could blink, that cop stormed over, yanked Jay up by his collar, and slammed his fist into Jay's face. Right there in front of the judge, the lawyers, everyone, my brother's head snapped back, blood trickling from his lip. I screamed, but the bailiff grabbed me, told me to sit down or I'd be thrown out. I felt like I was drowning. How do you just sit there when someone you love is bleeding, humiliated, treated like less than human? The judge banged her gavel, called for order, but didn't say a word to the cop. Not one word. Jay looked at me, and I swear it was like he was saying, "Sis, don't break, not yet." But I was breaking. I was thinking about every time I told him to trust the system, to believe justice would work. What a lie that felt like now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing his face, the blood, the way the cop smirked like he'd won something. I felt so powerless, so small. I kept asking myself, why didn't I do something? Why didn't I scream louder, fight harder? But Jay, he wasn't done. He called me from lockup, his voice steady despite everything. "I'm not letting this go," he said. "They think they broke me, but they didn't." I didn't know what he meant, but there was something in his voice, a fire I hadn't heard before. He wasn't just angry. He was planning, and I was terrified because I knew my brother. When he sets his mind to something, he doesn't stop. What was he going to do? Fight back? But how, and at what cost? The next morning, I was a mess. My hands were shaking as I made coffee, spilling grounds all over the counter. I kept replaying the punch, the cop's fist connecting with Jay's face, the way the room went silent, except for my scream. I felt like I'd failed him. I'm his big sister, you know. I'm supposed to protect him, not just sit there while some power-tripping cop treats him like a punching bag. I kept thinking about Mom, how she'd raised us to be strong, to keep our heads up no matter what. But how do you do that when the world keeps knocking you down? I went to the courthouse early, my stomach in knots. Jay's lawyer, Ms. Carter, was waiting for me outside. She's this fierce woman, mid-40s, with a no-nonsense vibe but eyes that tell you she's seen too much. "He's okay," she said before I could even ask, physically at least, but he's got a plan. I didn't like the sound of that. Jay's plans usually meant trouble, like the time he borrowed my car to go paint a mural at 2 a.m. But Ms. Carter's face was calm, almost proud. "He's smart, your brother, smarter than they think." When they brought Jay into the courtroom, my heart stopped. His lip was swollen, a purple bruise blooming under his eye. But he wasn't slouched anymore. He sat up straight, his eyes locked on the judge like he was daring her to look away. I could feel it. Something was different. The cop was there too, sitting with his arms crossed, looking bored. like he hadn't just assaulted a kid in front of everyone. I wanted to scream at him, to make him feel what Jay felt. But I just sat there, my hands clenched, waiting. MS. Carter stood up and started talking, her voice sharp but controlled. She wasn't addressing the petty charge anymore. No, she was filing a motion, something about excessive force and civil rights violations. I didn't understand all the legal jargon, but I caught the important part. Jay wasn't just fighting the charge against him. He was fighting back against the cop. He'd told MS. Carter everything. How the cop had been harassing him for months, pulling him over for no reason, calling him names I won't repeat. And now, this punch in the courtroom. It was the final straw. MS. Carter laid it all out. The cop's history of complaints, the witnesses who saw what happened, the fact that the courtroom had cameras. My heart was pounding. Cameras. I hadn't even thought about that. There was proof, but then the cop's lawyer stood up, all smug, saying Jay had provoked the officer, that he'd been disrespectful. Disrespectful for whispering to his lawyer. I wanted to stand up and yell, but MS. Carter shot me a look that said, "Stay calm, we've got this." The judge listened, her face unreadable. I kept looking at Jay, trying to catch his eye, but he was focused, like he was somewhere else entirely. MS. Carter kept going, her voice rising now, talking about systemic bias, about how black kids like Jay are targeted, punished for existing. She said the punch wasn't just an attack on Jay. It was an attack on justice itself. I felt tears prick my eyes, not just for Jay, but for every kid like him, every family like ours, sitting in courtrooms, hoping for fairness that never comes. Then came the bombshell. MS. Carter revealed that Jay had been working with her all night, not just to fight the charge, but to file a formal complaint against the cop. Not just that, they were pushing for a federal investigation. Federal? I didn't even know what that meant, not really, but it sounded big, scary big. The cop's face changed then, the boredom replaced by something else. Fear, maybe, or anger. I couldn't tell, but it felt good to see him squirm. The judge didn't rule on anything right then. She said she'd review the motion, the footage, everything. But the air in the room had shifted. People were whispering, reporters scribbling in their notebooks. Jay looked at me for the first time that day, and he gave me this tiny nod, like he was saying, "I told you I'd fight." But I wasn't relieved. I was terrified. What if this made things worse? What if they came after him harder now? I'd heard stories. Cops don't like being challenged, especially not by kids like Jay. I kept thinking about all the times I'd told him to keep his head down, to not make waves. Had I been wrong all along? That night, I couldn't stop pacing. Jay was still in lockup, but he'd called again, sounding almost hopeful. "Sis, this isn't just about me," he said. "It's about all of us." I wanted to believe him, but all I could think about was the bruise on his face, the way the cop's fist had landed. I kept asking myself, what if fighting back costs him everything? His future, his art, his freedom. I felt so alone, sitting in my apartment, staring at the walls covered in Jay's sketches. He was so talented, so full of life. Why did it have to be this hard for him, for us? I started thinking about my own life, too. I'd been so focused on protecting Jay, I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding back in my own relationships. I'd pushed people away, friends, boyfriends, because I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Always expecting betrayal. Watching Jay get hit like that, it was like all my fears came true. The world wasn't safe, not for him, not for me. But he wasn't giving up, so why was I? The next few weeks were a blur, but they felt like years. Jay's case became a local story, then a national one. The courtroom footage leaked. Someone, I don't know who, got it online. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the cop who punched a black teen in court. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters, activists, even strangers leaving voicemails saying they were praying for Jay. I wasn't ready for any of it. I just wanted my brother home, safe, not some symbol for a cause. But Jay, he leaned into it. MS. Carter got him released on bail, and when he walked out of that detention center, I hugged him so tight I thought I'd never let go. His bruise was fading, but his eyes were different now. Harder, but also brighter, like he'd found something inside himself he didn't know was there. "We're not done," he told me as we drove home. "This cop, he's not getting away with it." I wanted to tell him to slow down, to think about himself first, but I didn't. I could see it now. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every kid who'd been profiled, every family who'd sat in a courtroom feeling helpless. Ms. Carter was building a case, not just for Jay's charge, but against the cop. She found more witnesses, other kids he'd harassed, even another officer who said he'd seen the guy lose his temper before. But the deeper we got, the uglier it became. The cops' buddies in the department started circling the wagons, spreading rumors about Jay, saying he was a troublemaker, that he'd deserved it. I saw it online, in the comments under articles about the case. People who didn't know Jay, didn't know us, saying the most hateful things. It felt like a knife in my chest every time I read one. I started doubting everything. Was this worth it? Were we just making ourselves targets? I'd lie awake at night, imagining the cop showing up at our door, or worse, Jay getting hurt again. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating right. My friends noticed, kept asking if I was okay. But how do you explain this kind of fear? It wasn't just about the cop anymore. It was about what he represented. All the ways the world tells you you're not enough, that you don't deserve to fight back. I'd spent my whole life trying to be strong, to be the perfect sister, the perfect daughter, but it felt like I was failing at all of it. Then came the hearing, not for Jay's original charge, that got dropped after the footage went viral, but for the cop. Ms. Carter had filed a civil suit, and the federal investigation was moving forward. The courtroom was packed, reporters everywhere, cameras flashing as we walked in. Jay was calm, almost too calm, but I was falling apart inside. What if the judge didn't believe us? What if the system protected its own, like it always did? I kept thinking about all the stories I'd heard, all the times justice didn't come. The cop took the stand, and I swear I could barely breathe. He didn't look sorry. He said Jay had threatened him, that he'd felt unsafe. Unsafe? A grown man with a badge and a gun, scared of a 17-year-old kid in handcuffs. I wanted to scream, but Jay just sat there, his jaw tight, his eyes on the cop. Ms. Carter tore into him, asking about his record, the complaints, the other kids he'd roughed up. She played the footage, and there it was, on a big screen for everyone to see, his fist slamming into Jay's face. The room went quiet, just like it had that day. I felt my throat close up, tears burning my eyes. But then something happened. The cop started to crack. He stumbled over his words, contradicted himself. Ms. Carter didn't let up, pressing him on every lie, every excuse. By the end, he was sweating, his hands shaking. The judge's face was still unreadable, but I could feel it. The tide was turning. Jay leaned over and whispered, "We're getting him, sis." And for the first time in weeks, I believed him, but it wasn't over. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice, low and threatening. "Tell your brother to back off," he said. "You don't know what you're messing with." I froze, my heart pounding so loud I thought I'd pass out. I didn't tell Jay. I couldn't. He was already carrying so much. But I started looking over my shoulder, checking my locks twice, jumping at every noise. I felt like I was betraying him by being scared, like I was letting him down again. Why couldn't I be as brave as he was? I started thinking about my own life again, about how I'd been running from my own pain. I'd had a boyfriend, Chris, who I pushed away last year because I was scared he'd hurt me. Not physically, but emotionally. I kept waiting for him to leave, so I left first. Watching Jay fight, I realized I'd been doing the same thing, keeping my guard up, expecting the worst. But Jay wasn't running. He was standing tall even when it hurt. Maybe I needed to stop running too. The judge's ruling came a month later. The cop was suspended pending the federal investigation. It wasn't a full win. Jay wanted him fired, prosecuted, but it was something. For the first time, I saw the system bend just a little. Jay's charge was gone, his record clean, but the real victory was in his eyes. He wasn't that scared kid in the orange jumpsuit anymore. He was someone who'd fought and won, not just for himself, but for everyone watching. I'm still processing it. I keep thinking about that punch, how it broke something in me, but also woke something up. Jay's fight made me see my own, how I've been so afraid of getting hurt that I've pushed everyone away. I called Chris the other day just to talk. I don't know if we'll get back together, but I'm done running. I'm done letting fear win. Jay taught me that. He took the law and made it his weapon, not theirs. And I'm so damn proud of him, but here's the thing, it's not over. There are more cops like that, more kids like Jay, more sisters like me, sitting in courtrooms holding their breath. I can't stop thinking about them, about us. What would you do if it was your brother, your sister, your heart on the line? Would you fight? Would you stay silent? I want to hear your stories. Drop them in the comments. Let's talk about the fights we're still fighting, the ones we're too scared to start. And if this hit you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button, share this video. Let's make sure no one forgets what happened to Jay and what he did about it.